March 23, 1945. Dawn. Field Marshal Albert Kessering's headquarters, somewhere in western Germany. The phone rings. His chief of staff hands him the intelligence report, and Kessering's face goes pale. Third Army crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim last night. Bridgehead secured. No artillery preparation. No warning. Just assault boats in the dark. Kessering, the master defensive strategist who held the Allies at bay in Italy for 2 years, realizes his worst nightmare has come true. The Americans have done the impossible. They've crossed Germany's sacred river without firing a shot. And worse, they did it 12 hours before anyone expected. Now he has to tell Hitler. This is the story of what Kessering really said when Patton crossed the Rhine, and how that crossing sent shockwaves through the highest levels of the German command. March 10, 1945. 2 weeks earlier, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring arrives at his new command. Hitler has just fired Gerd von Rundstedt after the disaster at Remagen, where American forces captured an intact bridge across the Rhine. Kesselring, 59 years old, is Hitler's go-to man for impossible situations. In Italy, he turned retreat into an art form, holding off overwhelming Allied forces for 18 months through brilliant defensive warfare. But this time is different. Kesselring surveys what's left of the Western Front and sees catastrophe. The German army has been reduced to 26 divisions, most of them shattered remnants. He has 3 army groups to defend the entire Rhine. Army Group H in the north, under Johannes Blaskowitz, Army Group B in the center, under Walter Model, and Army Group G in the south, under Paul Hauser. Intelligence reports indicate Montgomery's 21st Army Group is preparing a massive crossing at Wesel in the north. That's the main threat. That's where Kesselring concentrates his limited resources. On paper, it makes perfect sense. Montgomery's crossings will be at the widest, most defendable part of the Rhine. The British commander never attacks without overwhelming preparation. Kesselring has time to organize his defense. But Kesselring knows the Americans are different. Patton's Third Army has just completed a devastating campaign in the Saar-Palatinate. In 5 days between March 18th and 22nd, Patton's forces captured 68,000 Germans, killed or wounded another 99,000, and seized 6,484 square miles of territory. German resistance west of the Rhine has collapsed completely. On March 11th, Kesselring meets with General Alfred Schlemm, commander of 1st Parachute Army, defending the northern Rhine. Schlemm, a tough paratrooper, assures him the Rhine line can be held. He reports his army saved almost all its artillery and has enough troops to build a new defensive front on the east bank. Schlemm correctly guesses Montgomery will attack at Emmerich and Ries, and he's positioning 814 heavy and light anti-aircraft guns to counter the inevitable airborne assault. Kesselring nods his approval. The north is as ready as it can be. But what about the south? What about Patton? March 20th, 1945. Kesselring receives reports that Patton's forces have reached the Rhine near Mainz. Intelligence suggests the Americans will cross north of the city, where the terrain is more favorable. It makes tactical sense. South of Mainz, they'd have to cross both the Rhine and the main river, which converges with the Rhine at that point. But Kesselring has fought Americans before. He knows they're aggressive, opportunistic, willing to take risks that would horrify German or British commanders. He orders General Holmes' corps to strengthen defenses along the entire Rhine south of Mainz, just in case. Then Kesselring makes a decision that will haunt him. The 6th SS Mountain Division, still a fairly creditable unit with the equivalent of 2 infantry regiments and 2 light artillery battalions, is defending the Rhine Gorge opposite where Patton's forces are concentrated. Kesselring orders the division transferred southeast toward Wiesbaden. Why? Because 2 days earlier, on March 18th, Kesselring gave his blessing to the German 7th Army's withdrawal behind the Rhine. His forces are in complete disarray. German commanders are more focused on reorganizing their fleeing remnants than on actually manning defensive positions. Kesselring believes he has time. He believes the Americans will take days to prepare a crossing, just like Montgomery. He's catastrophically wrong. March 22, 1945, 10 p.m., near Oppenheim, 10 miles south of Mainz. The first assault boats of the 5th Infantry Division's 11th Infantry Regiment slide quietly into the Rhine. Colonel Paul Black's men paddle through darkness, expecting at any moment to be caught in searchlights and machine gun fire. On the east bank, scattered remnants of shattered German divisions sit in hastily prepared positions. Most are exhausted, demoralized survivors of the Palatinate disaster. Some are more interested in surrendering than fighting. They've had only 2 days to establish positions. German artillery observers scan the west bank but see nothing unusual. No massive artillery concentrations. No obvious preparations for assault. Just another quiet night. At midnight, the 11th Infantry Regiment establishes a foothold on the east bank. By dawn on March 23rd, 3 infantry regiments and supporting troops are across. Engineers begin constructing pontoon bridges. The crossing has succeeded with remarkably light casualties. Fewer than 30 killed and wounded in the initial assault. March 23, 1945, 7 a.m. Kesselring's headquarters. The phone call comes from 7th Army headquarters. Americans have crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim. Bridgehead expanding. No artillery preparation. Complete surprise. Kesselring's first reaction is disbelief. A Rhine crossing without artillery bombardment? Without airstrikes? Without days of preparation? Impossible. But as reports flood in throughout the morning, the impossible becomes undeniable. Patton has done it. The Americans are across. Kesselring immediately grasps the strategic implications. The Oppenheim bridgehead threatens to unhinge his entire southern defense. If Patton can reinforce and expand quickly enough, Third Army could drive straight into the heart of Germany while German forces are still focused on preparing for Montgomery's crossing in the north. He orders immediate counterattacks, but his staff reports the grim reality. There are no significant reserves available. The 6th SS Mountain Division he ordered transferred from the Rhine Gorge is now 30 miles away and cannot return in time. Other units are scattered, disorganized, and exhausted from the Palatinate campaign. Kesselring picks up the phone to call Berlin. Hitler must be informed. The conversation is brief and professional, but Kesselring knows what's coming. The Führer will demand the impossible. Attack the bridgehead. Throw the Americans back across the Rhine. Restore the situation. In Berlin's underground command bunker, Adolf Hitler receives the news with predictable fury. His face flushes red. He slams his fist on the map table. Attack, he screams. Attack the bridgehead at Oppenheim immediately. Every available division. Push the Americans back into the Rhine. General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Wehrmacht Operations, delivers the devastating assessment. Main 4, there are no reserve forces available to embark on such an operation. The words hang in the bunker's stale air like a death sentence. Hitler turns to Kesselring's liaison officer. Order Kesselring to counterattack anyway. Use whatever forces he has. The Americans cannot be allowed to establish themselves on the east bank. But it's too late. By afternoon on March 23rd, Patton has 3 infantry regiments, supporting troops, and engineers working on pontoon bridges across the Rhine. American artillery on the west banks, High ground provides devastating fire support for the bridgehead. Any German counterattack would have to cross flat, open terrain under observation and direct fire. Kesselring understands the tactical reality, even if Hitler doesn't. A counterattack with the scattered forces available would be suicide. Instead, he orders General Hohn's corps to contain the bridgehead while attempting to reinforce defensive positions further east. It's damage control, not counteroffensive. Later that day, 12 German planes attacked the crossing sites in desperate attempts to disrupt the American operation. They dropped bombs and strafed the pontoon bridges. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, can muster only a dozen aircraft. American pilots flying cover shoot down 19 German planes throughout the day. The air attacks accomplished nothing beyond killing 2 American soldiers and setting 1 ammunition truck ablaze. Kesselring watches his defense crumble. On March 24th, as Montgomery's massive operation, plunder begins in the north with 4,000 artillery pieces and the largest single-day airborne operation in history. Patton's bridgehead at Oppenheim continues expanding. By nightfall, it's 5 miles deep. By March 26th, 2 pontoon bridges span the Rhine at Oppenheim, and 60,000 American vehicles have crossed. The psychological impact on German command is devastating. Kesselring, the defensive genius, has been outmaneuvered by American audacity. The Rhine, Germany's sacred river, the historic boundary of German power in the West, has been breached without the elaborate preparation everyone expected was necessary. In Hitler's bunker, the Führer's rage gives way to something worse: recognition. Even his closest supporters, Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Goebbels, understand the implications. Goebbels writes in his diary on March 24th that the situation in the West has entered an extraordinarily critical phase. He notes the Rhine crossing on a broad front and foresees Allied attempts to encircle the Ruhr industrial heartland. Hitler issues increasingly desperate orders. Hold every position, no retreat. Counterattack everywhere. But Kesselring recognizes these orders for what they are: the commands of a leader who has lost touch with military reality. Germany no longer has the forces to hold, let alone counterattack. The 214 German divisions on the Eastern Front facing the Soviets cannot be transferred west. There are no strategic reserves. There is no miracle weapon coming. March 25th and 26th, 1945. Patton makes 2 more assault crossings. The 87th Division crosses at Boppard in the early morning hours of March 25th. The following morning, the 89th Division crosses at St. Goar. Each crossing is contested, but German resistance, though occasionally fierce, cannot prevent the inevitable. American forces establish bridgehead after bridgehead, each one expanding and connecting with the others. Kesselring's staff prepares defensive positions further east, attempting to establish a coherent line somewhere, anywhere, that might slow the American advance. But it's futile. The operational situation has shifted fundamentally. The Rhine was supposed to be the barrier that bought Germany time. Instead, it's become just another river in the rearview mirror of American advance. What Kesselring said to his staff during these dark days was captured in reports and post-war interviews. He reportedly told his subordinates that Patton's crossing represented everything the Wehrmacht had failed to anticipate about American warfare. The Americans, he noted bitterly, didn't fight by European rules. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't pause to consolidate. They attacked relentlessly, accepting risks that seemed reckless but produced results German commanders could not match. More damning was Kesselring's assessment of his own failure. He had moved the 6th SS Mountain Division away from Oppenheim just hours before Patton attacked. He had assumed the Americans would need time to prepare. He had focused on Montgomery's threat in the north while Patton struck in the south. Every assumption had been wrong. But Kesselring was too professional to make excuses. In conversations with Field Marshal Model and other commanders, he acknowledged the fundamental problem. Germany was fighting a modern industrial war with pre-industrial resources. The Wehrmacht lacked fuel, ammunition, replacement troops, and, most critically, time. The Rhine crossing didn't change this reality. It simply made it undeniable. Hitler's panic, meanwhile, intensified throughout late March. He issued the Nero Decree on March 19th, ordering the destruction of all German infrastructure to deny it to the Allies. When Kesselring pointed out this would doom the German people, Hitler reportedly responded that if Germany lost the war, the German people deserved to perish. They had proven themselves weak. This was the madness Kesselring now served. A leader who preferred national suicide to surrender. A commander-in-chief who issued impossible orders from an underground bunker while artillery shells fell on Berlin. A dictator who blamed everyone, generals, soldiers, the German people, for failures that stemmed from his own strategic incompetence. April 1945. As American and Allied forces pour across the Rhine and drive deep into Germany, Kesselring attempts to organize some semblance of defense. But it's hopeless. By the end of March, Patton's Third Army has captured 300,000 prisoners. The Ruhr industrial region is encircled. Army Group B, 325,000 men strong, is trapped and will surrender on April 18th. Kesselring's final assessment, recorded in post-war interviews, was brutally honest. The Rhine crossing at Oppenheim wasn't militarily significant because of tactical brilliance or overwhelming force. It was significant because it demonstrated that Germany had lost the initiative completely and irretrievably. When an American army could cross Germany's most important defensive barrier on a few hours' notice, without elaborate preparation, and expand that bridgehead into a full-scale offensive, the war was over. Everything after that was just dying. What Kesselring never said publicly, but implied in every report and conversation, was this: Hitler's panic was justified. Not because Patton's crossing was unstoppable, but because it revealed that nothing was stopping the Allies anymore. Not the Rhine, not the Wehrmacht's fighting spirit, not Hitler's increasingly delusional orders. The master defensive strategist who had held the Allies at bay in Italy for 2 years had nothing left to work with. No reserves, no time, no hope. Just the slow, inexorable collapse of the Third Reich as American, British, Canadian, and French forces drove toward Berlin from the west, while Soviet armies advanced from the east. When Field Marshal Kesselring surrendered on May 7, 1945, less than 7 weeks after Patton's Rhine crossing, he surrendered as commander of forces that existed more on paper than in reality. The Wehrmacht in the West had been shattered beyond recovery, not by any single battle, but by cumulative defeats that began at Normandy and ended at the Rhine. Patton's audacious crossing at Oppenheim entered history as a testament to American aggressive warfare. But for Kesselring, it represented something else entirely. The moment when Germany's best defensive strategist realized that no amount of tactical skill could overcome strategic bankruptcy. The moment when even masterful defense couldn't prevent defeat. The moment when Hitler's panic was no longer irrational, but simply recognition of reality. 2 commanders, 2 philosophies, 1 river, and the crossing that marked not just Patton's triumph, but the final collapse of German resistance in the West. That was what Kesselring understood. When Patton crossed the Rhine, that was why Hitler panicked. The war wasn't just being lost. It was already lost. Everything after March 22, 1945 was epilogue.